Good morning everyone, I am Haroon Idrees and welcome to my dissertation presentation, which is about visual analysis of extremely dense crowded scenes. So dense crowds occur in a variety of situations such as concerts, political speeches, rallies, marathons and stadiums. And visual analysis of dense crowds is important from the point of view of safety and surveillance, as it can be used to detect anomalous behaviors. It can also be used to find the volume of commuters such as in railway stations, and can be used to gauge the political significance of a rally or a protest. Dense crowds are characterized by a large number of targets and small target size, which means fewer pixels per person, and they have typically severe occlusions. Perspective effects are also there, which have to be taken into consideration, and many individuals have appearance which is very similar to their neighbors, which makes the analysis of such dense crowds very difficult. So the problems that we address in this dissertation are the following. Given an image, we want to come up with a count that describes the number of people in that image. We also want to localize people, where we want to pinpoint the location of each person. And we want to detect humans, such as shown with the white rectangles here, covering the visible parts of all the humans. And given a video of dense crowd, we want to track all the individuals and come up with the tracks across the frames. So there are three main parts of the dissertation. The first is about counting and localization. The second is about human detection. And the third is about tracking. And there are two key ideas that we use in this dissertation. The first is that there will be some individuals which can be detected and tracked with high confidence, and we want to diffuse their knowledge into the rest of the crowd. And the second are the strong consistency cues that are available in dense crowds, which can be in the form of counts, appearance, scales, and motion, which means that the counts or the scale of individuals in local neighborhoods will be very similar. So the first part, which is about counting and localization, here we address two very related problems. The first is, given an image, we want to find the number of people in it, and sometimes the analyst or user may want exact count. So if we output the exact location of individuals, then it is easy to go through the entire localized individuals and fix the errors and come up with the exact count for that image. So first, just the counting. Given an image like this, there are 634 people in the ground truth, and we estimated 640 people. Similarly, for this image in a stadium, there were 1567 people, and we estimated 1590. For this image, we overestimated by about 40 people. Similarly, here we underestimated by 20 people, and here the error was about 80 people. So there are two ways to approach this problem. The first is by detection. So given an image or video sequence, we can detect all the humans and then count their number. One work in this direction is the CVPR 2006 paper, where they track particles on individuals and cluster them, and the idea is that the number of clusters will correspond to the number of individuals. The second is through regression, where we find local features and then learn a mapping function directly to the counts. One work in this direction is the CVPR 2008 paper, where the authors segment the motion of humans into different groups and then compute segment, edge, and texture features, which are followed by Gaussian process regression. Another work in this direction is this NIPS 2010 paper, where they focus on regions that have high error during the training, and the learning is then focused on such regions. Since this is a counting problem, it can be seen as a spatial Poisson counting process, which over images is non-homogeneous. What that means is that the parameter lambda of the process varies across the image. So what we do is we divide the image into small patches and assume that the density will be uniform, and that makes the process homogeneous. So we divide the image into small patches, and then the number of people in each patch can be given by this equation here, where lambda is the density which we have to estimate, and this gives the size of the patch, so that their product will give us the total count. And if we assume the counts in patches are independent, so we can just add them up. But although this simplifies the counting estimation, this is not necessarily correct, because there is strong dependence between neighboring patches. The count in this region will be somewhat similar to count in this region, and so on. So what we do is we use Markov Random Field to model the dependence between counts in different patches. So here is our framework. We use three sources: head detection, Fourier analysis, and interest point based counts, and fuse them to obtain count in small patches, and then use Markov Random Field to infer the counts in the entire image. The first source is head detections. Human detections are not feasible because they are usually not visible. So we do head detections, and we use a deformable paths model trained on India person dataset. We use a very low threshold to get a high number of detections, and the detections have both scale and confidence, and we compute certain features based on the scale and confidences, and we get a 5-dimensional vector per patch. So here are some of the intermediate results. So when the heads are close to the camera, we can detect them with a high confidence, but as you can see, there are lots of false positives and negatives. When the head detection fails, we rely on Fourier analysis, and as you can see, there is a periodic occurrence of heads in dense crowds, as seen here. So what we do is we take a patch, compute its gradient, take the Fourier transform, filter high frequency and weak amplitude signals, and then reconstruct the patch using inverse Fourier transform. So here are some of the intermediate results. Given a patch on the left, the gradient is shown in the middle, and the reconstruction is shown on the right. So the total number of local maximas in this reconstruction is 195, and the ground truth count is 54. In a second patch from another image, shown on the second row, the number of local maximas increases to 238, and the ground truth count increases to 102. Similarly, for another patch, both the number of local maximas and ground truth count increase. So there is a strong correlation between these two measures, and between the number of local maximas and ground truth. So this is another source of information that can be used. So what we do is we find the number of local maximas. That's one feature, and we also compute the sum of difference between the gradient patch and the reconstructed patch, and we compute some statistical measures on the reconstructed patch and the difference patch. So this gives us a 12-dimensional vector per patch. The third source of information for counting in patches is the interest points. So we compute SIFT features and then quantize them into a bag of words representation and do sport vector regression to predict the densities. Sometimes there will be repetitive patterns that do not correspond to crowd, and we have to ignore counts from such patches. So what we do is we model the feature occurrence as a Poisson random variable given by this equation. Then given some positive and negative patches, we can find the likelihood whether that patch contains people or not. So these are some of the intermediate results for two images. This is the confidence that we get. As you can see, in the region between the tiers, in the stadium and the floodlights and sky, we get very low confidence. So we can ignore the counts from these patches. And these are the ground truth counts. As you can see, they correlate really well with the confidence that we get. So we obtain feature vectors from the three sources, and we concatenate them to get a 20-dimensional feature vector, and which contains both the counts and confidences from the three sources. We densely sample patches for training, and since our dataset contains dotted annotations, we can count the number of people in each of the ground truth patch that is used for training, and then use sport vector regression to predict the densities. To impose the smoothness, we use a Markov Random Field, and typically for images, spatial MRF is used, where we have an energy function which contains the unary cost and the binary cost, which captures the smoothness. And we can infer through belief propagation, where each patch passes messages to the neighboring patches, and then the beliefs can be computed in the end using the unary cost and the messages that have been passed. The label or the count which has the highest confidence or highest belief is then selected as the count for that patch. Since we do not know the exact scale at which to perform the analysis, we use multi-scale Markov Random Field, where we estimate the number of people in each of these patches across multiple scales, as you can see here. And while inferring the counts for the entire image, we impose certain smoothness constraints across scales as well. So the number of people in this patch should be somewhat similar to the number of people in these four patches. Here are some of the intermediate results for 3x3 patches from three different images. Here is the ground truth. The patch that we are considering is shown in the middle. So Before using the Markov Random Field, we get a higher count for this patch in the middle, 31 as opposed to 13. So after using the Markov Random Field, the number of people in this patch is 14, and that is much similar to the number of people in the ground truth, 13, as you can see here. The existing datasets that have been used to address this problem contain up to 50 people per image, as you can see here. And they are low to medium density and are videos, and they use temporal information. So for still images, we collected a new dataset which has 50 images with 64,000 annotations, and the number of people in each image range from 94 to almost 4,500. For experiments, we did 5-fold cross-validation, and the measures we use are absolute difference, which is the estimated count minus the ground truth count, and the normalized absolute difference, which is the percentage error. Some quantitative results for this image. The Fourier analysis gives the best results of the three sources, 1128, and when we fuse the three sources, we get 1468, which is much closer to the ground truth, which is 1428. Similarly, for the second image, the head detections work well with 1461 as the estimated number of people, and the fusion gives 1499. In the third image, the SIF features work really well, and they have an estimation of 2059, and the fusion of the three sources is better than either of them with 2200 people, and the ground truth count contains 2322 individuals. Across all the 50 images, the Fourier gives an error of almost 84%. If we introduce the confidence, the error goes down to 41%. If we use head detections, the absolute difference goes down to 510 people. If you use shift-based regression, the percentage error goes down to 32%. And using the Markov Random Field gives the lowest, best results with 1419 as the absolute difference and 31% as the percentage error. We also compare against two related methods, both of which give very high percentage error, and I'll explain why that is the case. So some per patch analysis. In this graph, the images have been sorted from according to the number of people. So the first image contains the fewest people, and the last image, 50th image, contains the most number of people. And this is the absolute error per patch. As you can see, as the number of people in the images increases, the error also increases, which is kind of predictable. But the percentage error is very low for the range in the middle, as you can see here. And the reason for that is the largest count, the 50th image, is almost 5,000% of the count of the smallest of the lowest count image. And when we are doing the regression, the learning is biased towards helps the ones in the middle. So for further analysis, we divided the dataset into 10 groups of 5 images. Here I'll show you the percentage error, and here the absolute counts that have been output by each of the methods. So these are the ground truth counts, which as you can see increase according to the number of people in the different groups. And this is the output of this method, which focuses on head detections. And as you can see, the reason for high error at both low and high density is that the head detections do not correspond well to the change in density. The output is very uniform. This method, which focuses on regions which have high absolute difference, performs well at the high density, but does not perform well at the low density. And the absolute counts, as you can see, it overestimates at the lower end, but corresponds well to the medium and high density. Our proposed method has uniform error rates across all the densities, and as you can see, the method adapts to the change in density really well, except for the last group where all the three methods perform worse. And the reason for that is one of the images is given here. We underestimated by about 2,000 people. And the reason for that is that the images in this group were high resolution, and so they were easier to annotate than low resolution images. And also the counts increase superlinearly, which means that for the first 40 images the trend is linear, but for the last group it is superlinear. So when we are doing the learning, the patches from these images are treated as outliers, and therefore they are difficult to predict when we are doing the testing. And also the humans become small and similar, and which may result in reduced discrimination using the SIFT features. The associated problem is localization. So in the proposed method that I just described, we obtain just one number for the entire image. But sometimes the user is interested in accurate count and wants to quantify how much the error is. So for that, if we give the user localized individuals, then he can go through the entire image and fix the errors and then obtain the exact count for that image. And the idea that we use is that the crowd is inherently repetitive, and so we want to exploit the recurring patterns that occur in the form of heads. So first we do head detections, and then we find the matches locally to generate more hypotheses in terms of detections. We also want to find representative samples that can be then correlated or matched across the entire image at multiple scales. And by increasing the number of hypotheses using these two ways, we then do hypothesis selection, where we use binary integer quadratic programming. So here is again the schematic outline. Given an image, we detect heads, and then we correlate the high confidence detections locally, and these are the correlation surface for some of the detections. And we also find representative samples which are then correlated across the entire image at multiple scales. The first one are the local matches that we obtain, and these are some of the intermediate results. Here the detection is shown with the yellow circle here, and which corresponds to only the part of a head. And we were able to detect more hats or more repetition of such hats using the local search. Similarly, for this case, we found similar looking individuals in 4 similar looking individuals. And for high densities, and when the appearance is very similar, we can find even more number of individuals, as you can see in the bottom row. And to make sure that we increase the number of hypotheses across the entire image, we also divide the image into cells uniformly, and then pick the highest confidence detection in each cell, and then we correlate that locally in the same cell. And these are the correlation surfaces that we get from in the different cells. So now, given the hypothesis that we have, we group them into different clusters in terms of appearance. And the idea is that we want to select high confidence and very discriminative templates or heads from all the members in each cluster. And then we can correlate them across multiple scales to increase the number of hypotheses. So for given this image and given all the detection hypotheses that we have, we cluster them. This is the first cluster. As you can see, most of the heads look very similar to each other. Here the cluster center is given by the yellow here, and the most discriminative and high confidence head is given in the red. And I'm showing both the first top 3 representative samples given red, green and blue here. So the red patch or the red head is correlated across multiple scales across the entire image. So these are more clusters, and all of them capture similar looking individuals, and the red ones are the ones that are correlated across multiple scales. Similarly, these are rest of the clusters. And once we have all the hypotheses from the previous 2 methods that I described, we get, let's say, a capital Q number of hypotheses, where the position of each hypothesis is given by XQ, the scale is given by SQ, confidence by C, and the appearance or the template is given by capital T. For optimization, our goal is to select as many hypotheses as possible where the preferences come from the confidence. So a higher confidence detection or head should have a higher chance of getting selected. We also want to prefer a repetition where we impose similarity both in terms of appearance and the scale. So the detections should have very similar appearance and scale in local neighborhoods. And we also want to ensure only one detection per location so that there are not many overlapping detections. So mathematically, this is given by this objective function, where these are the preferences in the form of confidences, and these are the appearance and scale similarity between neighboring detection hypotheses. And to ensure that there is only one detection per location, we use this special order set type 1 constraints, where the goal is to select only one detection in a certain region. And since this is a selection problem, these are binary variables that have to be optimized over. So this is what the SOS constraints look like. So for each detection given with a yellow dot, the circle around it shows the region where only one detection should be selected. Here I'm enlarging the circles for visualization purposes, but many of them have a large amount of overlaps. And this can be solved using binary integer quadratic programming, and the objective function is given by this quadratic term and the linear term, and we have certain constraints given like this. And for our purposes, the vector f contains the negative of confidences, and the matrix Q captures the similarity of detections in scale and appearance given by these equations. So these are some of the results. Given an image, the true positives in this case are shown in white dots, the false positives are shown in red dots, and the false negatives or the misdetections are shown in green dots. Similarly here, the true positives are shown in white dots, false positives are shown in red dots, and the misdetections are shown in green dots. Overall, this gives an improvement of almost 3% in mean average precision. So here we propose two related approaches. The first is counting, where we use multiple sources in the form of Fourier analysis, head detections, and interest points. And we also used multiple scales through the multi-scale Markov Random Field. For localization, in order to get accurate counts in the image, we use the repetition in terms of scale and appearance. And we also proposed a new dataset which has 50 images and almost 64,000 annotations. The second part of the dissertation is about human detection using locally consistent scale prior and global occlusion reasoning. And the approach that I described previously only gives one dot or just a location of one person. But human detection is possible when the different parts or different humans are visible. So for that, we want to put a bounding box in terms of a rectangle on the visible parts of the humans, as shown in this image. State-of-the-art human detectors do not perform that well, and this is the output of a deformable parts model that I will just describe. And the reason for that is that they have lots of false positives in the regions where there are no people, and even when the detections occur on the crowd, they are at the incorrect scale as seen here. So our approach is independent of the detector that we use, but we use a deformable parts model because it gives state-of-the-art results. So it consists of a mixture model which has root filter for a person shown on the left, and then there are parts which are allowed to move from their respective position with certain penalty that is imposed depending on how much they move from their position. This is because humans are articulate objects, and they can deform. So for detection to detect people at multiple scales, they compute a pyramid H with a total of L levels, and the part position at each level is given by P, X, Y, L. And then the confidence of each detection, given all the constituent parts, is given by this equation where we have the part scores or the appearance scores based on the filters we have, deformation cost, where we penalize the parts which move from their training position, and the bias is a constant term to make the positive samples score positive and negative samples negative. And this gives us the confidence, and we can also compute the scale of each individual based on the size of the bounding box. So we get scale and confidence. Our framework consists of combination of part detection to detect partially visible humans, and then we use scale and confidence prior to impose smoothness constraints in terms of a scale. The Markov Random Field is used to impose a smoothness, and then once we have a number of detection hypotheses, we reason them globally for occlusion, and we get a final set of detections after that. Dense crowds offer a scale consistency cube, which means that the scale of an individual should be very similar to the ones in his surroundings. And given a pyramid like this, the person who is far away from the camera will be smaller in size, so he should be detected at a larger scale. Similarly, the person who is closer to the camera will appear larger in size and should be detected at a small scale. Similarly, the individuals that lie in the middle should be detected at appropriate scales. So once we have the scale prior, we can choose the correct hypothesis given a wide range of hypotheses. So what we do is we diffuse the knowledge of scale within local neighborhoods using both the scale and confidence. And then we use once we have learned the prior, we use that to alter the detections, the confidence of the detections. And since we neither know the scale prior nor the detections, we improve them in an iterative fashion where priors are improved using the detections and detections are improved using the priors. So given a set of Q detections with the location given by X and Y and the scale and confidence given with S and C, we want to infer the scale and confidence at each location in the image, and which is captured through this influence function, which is induced by every detection at each pixel. It's given by this equation where the detection omega q induces that particular influence at the location x, y in the image, and it is directly proportional to the confidence of the detection. High confidence detection should have more influence, and is inversely proportional to the distance from that particular pixel. As the distance from of the detection increases from the pixel, it should have lower influence, and is also directly proportional to the scale of the detection. Large size detections should have more influence so that the influence spreads at larger distances. So once we have this influence function, we can infer the scale and confidence prior. So we select at each location in the image, we select the detection hypothesis which has the most influence, which is given by Q star. And then the confidence prior at that location is given by the value of the influence function at that location, induced by that high confidence detection. And the scale prior is simply the value of the detection, the scale of the detection that has the highest confidence at that location. So some of the intermediate. For for smoothness we use Markov Random Field. Again, the unary and binary terms we have here. The labels are the scales, and we want to impose smoothness over the scales using this binary term on the right. The data term consists of a quadratic function, and the smoothness term is a truncated quadratic. Some intermediate results. Given head detections given by the white bounding boxes here, the confidence prior is shown here, where yellow means or white means high confidence, and the scale prior is given here. Here the brighter colors mean large scale, and after smoothness we get the final scale prior, which is shown with the smooth function over here. Once we have learned the scale prior, we alter the detections, the confidence of detections using the priors, and the new confidence of the detection is simply the confidence from the underlying human detector and a scale consistency measure which penalizes detection that are different from the scale that the prior at that location. And we do perform iterations where we improve the priors using the detections and improve the detections using the priors. And these are some of the intermediate results. As you can see, most of the heads, I am only visualizing the heads, most of the heads are at correct scale, and that's because of the smoothness constraint that we imposed using the scale prior. Some quantitative results. The underlying human detection gives the blue curve. Here I'm showing the precision versus recall, higher the better. And our method gives the red curve, which is significantly better than the underlying human detector. And I'm also quantifying the results of global scale estimation, which means that we fit a head plane over the entire image instead of the locally consistent version that we have. And those curves are shown in light green and dark green. As you can see, the locally consistent version works much better than the global priors. Different humans will have different visible parts. So because in dense crowds we have a lot of occlusions. So for that we detect multiple combination of parts. And if we apply the human detector entirely, it gives low confidence for humans that are partially visible. So we can lower the threshold, but that gives lots of false positives. So The combination of part detection caters for the partial occlusion that is present in dense crowds. In particular, we use 4 different combinations. The first is head, the second is head and shoulders, upper body, and full body. And we want to come up with these combination detectors without using the annotation for the individual parts. For that, what we do is we divide the latent SVM bias, given here B, into constituent parts. So given all the positive samples, we look at the scores for all the parts in all the positive samples, which is given by this equation. We also look at the score of parts in all the negative samples. And then we divide the bias term based on how much each part contributes to the positive samples and the negative samples. Once we have divided the bias into constituent parts, we can then find the bias for the combination of part detector, which is simply the sum of biases that belonging to the parts in that particular combination. Finally, the global occlusion reasoning. So here we want to come up with the bounding boxes that only cover the visible parts of human and do not have much overlap. So let's say we have 2 detections where we have certain amount of overlap between the 2 detections, and the overlap between parts is given with these colored lines here. And our goal here is to switch off different parts based on which of the parts are invisible. We have to infer that. Since dense crowd has cyclic dependencies, person A may occlude person B and person B may occlude person C. We solve this in a global fashion using binary integer linear programming, the objective function of which is given by this equation. This is the minimization and these are the constraints. So we impose 2 constraints, the overlapping and the chain constraints, and I'll describe that. So for overlapping constraints, we want to switch off parts. If 2 of the parts have overlap, we want to switch one of them. And these constraints are given by this. For every pair of parts that overlap, we want to make sure that the sum is less than 1 so that only 1 is selected. And Oj here is the amount of overlap that they have. But this may give degenerate solutions which have disconnected parts. What that means is the minimization can output head and legs as the output and ignore all the parts in the middle, that is switch them off. This is obviously a degenerate or incorrect solution, so we want to impose chain constraints which say that a part below should only be selected if the part above it is also selected. So the shoulder should be selected only if the head is selected as output. These constraints which impose contiguity are given by this matrix per detection. So we have 7 such constraints among all the different parts. And for each detection, we have one of these blocks, and for all the detections, we will have a block diagonal matrix, and each block captures the overlap, the chain constraints for one individual. These are some of the intermediate results. So given the 2 detections shown in white bounding boxes and their constituent parts shown in green and yellow, which have, as you can see, have a lot of overlap, after doing the occlusion reasoning, we inferred that only the head and right shoulder of this person is visible and the upper body of this person is visible. So this is done for the entire image. I'm only showing 2 people right now. Similarly, for the second case, it's not showing. We infer similarly the visible parts of individuals. So for evaluation, we collected a new dataset, and these are some of the images from that dataset. And for annotation, we marked the bounding boxes that cover the entire humans instead of just the pinpointed locations. It has 108 images with 36,000 annotations, and the average number of people is 338. And these are some of the statistics for all the images. The number of annotations is shown in y-axis, and the image number is shown on the x-axis. And 104 images have counts or number of people less than 1,000, and 4 of the images have higher count, as you can see here in the bottom. For training, we use the human detector trained on INRIA person dataset, and we also compute the biases on the INRIA dataset for the combination of part detection. And for testing, we use 100 images out of the dataset, and for validation or tuning the parameters, we used 8 images. And we used mean average precision to measure the performance. Some qualitative results. First, I'll show you how the combination of part detection improves over the human detector later in SVM. So here the false positives are shown in green, false negatives or misdetections are shown in black, and the correct detections are shown in the range from orange to yellow. And both of these detections are in both the images are plotted at the same precision, which means if there is a higher recall or higher number of detections on the right, that means improved performance. So the yellow arrows mark where the improvement occurs. So here, as you can see, these were not detected at that particular precision, and we were able to detect that in those two individuals in using combination of part detection. Here again, I show the improvement over combination of part detection using the scale prior. The combination of part detection output is shown on the left, and including the scale prior, the results are shown on the right. False negatives are shown with green, false positives are shown with black, and the true positives are shown in the orange to yellow range. And again, the yellow arrows mark where the improvement occurs. Finally, the results improvement through global occlusion reasoning. The false negatives are shown in green, false positives in black, and the correct detections are shown in orange to yellow. And as you can see here, this particular detection only had head and shoulders selected, but after doing the global occlusion reasoning, we get the entire upper body. Similarly, for this particular individual, the detection covered another individual, the bounding box, but after doing the occlusion reasoning, we only restrict the bounding box to just that to the head of that person, which is visible. Quantitatively, this is precision recall, higher the better. So this is the output of the human detector. This is a combination of part detection. When we include scale prior, we get further improvement, and this is the final results using global occlusion reasoning as well. And this is quantified through miss rate versus false positives per image. The lower, the better. Again, human detector, combination of part detection, scale prior, and occlusion reasoning. For further analysis, we divided the dataset into 4 densities: low, medium, high, and extreme. And these are the results. Scale prior improves across all the densities, as you can see the difference between orange and blue. Combination of part detector does not help at the lower densities, and the reason for that is the humans are usually entirely visible. And we also compared against several state-of-the-art methods using both precision and recall, and miss rate versus false positives per image shown here. The output of our method is shown in the red curve, and the other methods are shown in different colors, as you can see. We outperform by a large margin. Some final qualitative results. Here, the false negatives are shown in green, false positives in black, and the true positives are shown in white. Here, the false negatives in green, false positives in black, and the true positives in white. Similarly here, green are the false negatives, black are the false positives, and white are the true detections. There are some failure cases. Sometimes when the image is low resolution, especially at the regions that are away from the camera, there is a lot of blurring, which makes the human detection difficult. And sometimes the camera is located at an elevation which is very similar to the height of humans, and there is a lot of occlusion in those cases, which makes the detection difficult as well. And then there are sometimes hypersensitivity introduced using the priors, and sometimes we get high confidence false positives, which may hurt the inference of scale prior. In summary, we proposed to use scale consistency and to transfer the scale information in the form of an influence function, and which was smoothed using Markov Random Field. To detect multiple combination of parts, we introduce a new method where we do not require any annotation for the individual parts. And to come up with the tight bounding boxes, we use global occlusion reasoning. We also propose a new dataset which has 108 images with 36,000 bounding boxes. The last part of this talk is about tracking. And here the goal is to track individuals across the scene, as you can see with the green tracks here. And the existing methods that have been used for tracking require some sort of prior information where they learn crowd flow using some training frames of the video. This has some obvious issues, such as when the crowd flow is dynamic or explores new regions that have not been learned, then the prediction becomes difficult. And sometimes there are anomalies and camera motion and jitter which cannot be learned when using estimating crowd flow. So we use two key ideas. The first is prominence, which is visual constraints. There are some individuals which will stand out from the crowd in terms of appearance. So for instance, in these people, the ones marked in yellow have different appearance than the ones the rest of the crowd. So they should be easier to track because they are less likely to be confused. And we refer to them as queens or queen bees. The algorithm for detecting the queens is given an initial set of head detections. We extract RGB features, cluster them using Gaussian mixture model, sort the clusters according to density, where the mass is given by the number of points in that cluster and the volume is given by the ellipsoid at first sigma. Then we do back assignment, where we start with the sparse clusters and assign the points back to the individual templates. And here I'm showing the process of back assignment. The red ones are the ground truth queens or prominent individuals, and green are the non-queens. So as you can see, when we start with the sparse clusters, the red ones are filled first, and they are selected as the prominent individuals. So the density again is given by the mass over volume, and dense clusters imply that there are lots of similar points which can be clustered together, and sparse clusters imply the likelihood of unique points. So for given these templates, initial templates, after the clustering we get these clusters where each ellipsoid shows the one cluster. And as you can see, there were lots of people in the range from white to black in appearance, and those form very small, tight, dense clusters, whereas the ones in the green and the orange are different in appearance and form sparse clusters. And here I'm showing you the clusters colored through density. High density is shown with red, while the sparse clusters are shown with blue. And after back assignment, this is what we get. The dense clusters are not selected, while the red one are the queens that were selected. So this is the procedure. We first extract the features from the individual templates, do clustering, sorting of those clusters through density, and then back assignment and selection. In dense crowds, the motion of an individual is very similar to the ones in his neighbors. So for that, we use neighborhood motion concurrence, which has two components, self and neighbor. So given an individual moving to the right with this velocity, we have the original location given by the crosshair and an estimated location based on his self component given by this black Gaussian. And this is given through this equation, which has a scaling factor and a prediction through the Gaussian, where the state transition matrix is linear velocity. So given other individuals in his neighborhood, let's say the red individual moving in the same direction with a higher velocity, helps to estimate the position of that black person, that it should be here. Similarly, all the individuals in the neighborhood give some idea about where the person should be in the next frame. And this is again given through this equation, where Wj is the scaling factor based on the distance, and this is the Gaussian, where the state is given by the location of the black individual and the velocity of the neighboring individual. These are some real examples. So here I'm showing you the person under consideration with white crosshairs, and the neighbors are shown in colors, and line segments show the velocity. And this is the output of neighborhood motion concurrence model. And this is the appearance surface. If we just choose the appearance, this person has a lot of confusion, and this, after using NMC, we get one strong peak, which minimizes the confusion. This is the same in 2 dimensions. And if we just use the appearance, we incorrectly update the position to this other person shown in black. And if we use the neighborhood motion concurrence, we select the peak, and the red is the correct position that we update to. So we now combine both of the ideas, the prominence and neighborhood motion concurrence. The state is given by position and velocity, and the posterior probability of the state is given as the product of the appearance similarity score and the neighborhood motion concurrence. And we update the state which maximizes this product. To fuse the two ideas, we impose hierarchy on the order in which we update. So we start with the queens, where the queen is shown in red and the non-queen is shown in white. And this is the apparent surface of queen, which has not much confusion, but the non-queen has lots of confusion. So we help the queen to estimate the position of this non-queen in the next frame. And the influence is incorporated in form of neighborhood motion concurrence. We also use the feedback from tracker where we delay the position of update if the apparent score from the underlying tracker is low. So this is the one, on one frame, the output of hierarchical update. The queens are marked with black inside the red squares. And we start with the queens, then we update their neighbors using the neighborhood motion concurrence. And then we keep on doing that till we have updated position of all the individuals in the scene. In total, there are 220 individuals, and the color shows the time when the position was updated. So this is the directed acyclic graph that is produced by the hierarchical update. As you can see, the influence is passed from multiple individuals to neighboring individuals. And here is the procedure. We initialize the queens in a queue, and we find the state. If the confidence is low from the underlying tracker, we delay the update. Otherwise, we insert the neighbors of that particular person and continue the tracking. So we tested on 8 sequences given here. The first sequence has 152 people. This one has 235 people, 175 people, 747 people, 171, 600. And the last two are low to medium density with 73 people and 58 people each. For sequence 1, these are on the left I'm showing you the tracks output by our method. And on right is the performance of different methods, including ours, shown in red. The higher, the better. Similarly, on sequence 2, these are the tracks and the tracking accuracy on the right. For the other 6 sequences, the tracks are shown in the first and the third column, and the tracking accuracy is shown in the second and fourth column. So here is the quantitative comparison. On the first 6 sequences, we perform better, equal or better than the previous methods. But for the last 2 sequences, which are low to medium density, we perform slightly worse than them. And the reason is at low to medium density, the assumption of neighborhood motion concurrence begins to break down. And here are some of the results. The ground truth is shown in green. The proposed method is shown in red. One of the previous methods, which uses crowd flow estimation, is shown in yellow. And all of them superimposed are shown in the bottom right. And as you can see, the red ones are much better than yellow, despite they do not use, our method does not use any crowd flow estimation or learning. Here is the component contribution. So the distance, so if we just use underlying tracker, the output or the tracking accuracy is shown in blue. If we use the neighborhood motion concurrence, the tracking accuracy improves by 20%. And if you use the queens, it further improves by 6%. So we used visual and contextual information for tracking, and without learning any crowd flow or estimation. And we proposed a method to detect prominent individuals, and we also modeled the motion of individuals in a dense crowd. And we proposed a hierarchical update scheme where we use the prominence, the NMC, and feedback from the underlying tracker. So in conclusion, for counting, we use multiple sources, and the regression was performed using spot vector regression. And for smoothness in counts, we use multi-scale Markov Random Field. For localization, we proposed to find recurring patterns, and here the similarity in local neighborhoods was imposed in the form of appearance and scale. For human detection, we proposed to use locally consistent scale prior, and here the similarity was imposed in terms of scale. We also use combination of part detection and global occlusion reasoning to solve the problem. And for tracking, the similarity was imposed in terms of motion, that the motion should be similar for neighboring individuals. For future work, one idea is to use the estimation of horizon line for counting. So as you know that there will be no counts at a region belonging to the sky or above the horizon line. So if we are able to estimate the horizon line using some training data, we can ignore counts from those regions, which will improve the results. And we can also use multiple features. Right now we only use SIFT features. Deep features from deep networks have shown promise, so we can use them in association with SIFT. And for fusion, we can use multiple kernel learning. For localization, one idea is to use to detect partially visible heads, because sometimes even the heads are partially visible. And if we correlate half of the head templates, then we may be able to localize such heads also. And for human detection, right now the occlusion reasoning is separate from the detection framework. It is done as a post-processing step. If it is included within the detection framework, it may also lead to improvement in performance. And since our method is dependent on the underlying human detector, any improvement in the human detection will result in improvement in performance of our method. For tracking, one idea is to use to track all the individuals simultaneously, and here we can impose certain overlapping constraints where we want to minimize the drift between that occurs between neighboring individuals, and once we impose overlap constraints, then the tracks will not jump between individuals. And we can also use multiple frames simultaneously to track the individuals, which may lead to improved performance. So these are the publications. Thank you.